All right, everybody. I am so excited to have Trey Lawrence here on the show with us today. And Trey, I think that this is going to be such a good show because it's not very often that our audience gets to actually hear from an attorney and hear all of the great things that you're going to talk to us about and not have to pay for it on top of it all.
Absolutely. No, I'm well aware from a lifetime of going to family events how popular the free legal advice when you get the chance to corner the attorney is. So I'm happy
No.
to oblige.
Yeah, no, and all kidding aside, I really am very excited to have you on and to know that you're part of the general counsel with the AO. I think it's just going to be just some good information that you're going to be giving us today. And one of the things, in case people don't know about you or how you got into this side of I'll say law. I know you were in a big firm for quite a many years. Would you mind just giving us a little history up to present?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I am general counsel for the American Association of Orthodontists. So I head up the AAO's legal and advocacy team. So prior to that, I was at a big law firm for 18 years. I went to Washington University here in St. Louis for law school, and then was with a big firm that's based out of St. Louis for 18 years. So doing things that were not exactly healthcare related, although there's a basic toolkit of law. When you're talking about things like negligence, it doesn't matter if you're suing somebody, a construction worker or a dentist or an orthodontist, the legal elements are still basically the same. And in particular, I really value, actually, I think a lot of people come into a role like this at the AAO from a more of a healthcare background, which tends to be more transactional, doing deals and doctor contracts and that kind of thing. And I really appreciate being able to bring to our members and through my social media stuff, just the dental community in general, my trial background, because I was in the courtroom for 18 years. So it's really helpful to have seen the way that things play out, how a jury actually responds to things or a judge actually responds to if you did this or you didn't do that. So that's the kind of things that I brought with me. And I did have a lot of experience in my law firm days working for regulated utilities who are regulated by public service commissions, which I found out later are very analogous to dental boards. They operate the same way. They consider complaints the same way, all of those kind of things. So I brought all of that with me, but definitely once I came to the AAO about 4.5 years ago, quickly got up to speed on the dental and orthodontic side of things and learned all that pretty quickly, but happy to provide that toolkit that I had from my law firm days to our members and to the dental community.
Yeah, that's great. And what I love too is not only are you providing us and all the docs out there this really great counsel and good information, but you also have the ortho attorney and we can find you out socially too, which you just don't see that very often where you see that humor, but here's some really good points. And I know I follow what you do out there and I'm like, oh, that was really good. But yet it was in a lighthearted way that you're presenting it. So thanks for taking something that can be tough sometimes to talk about and putting it in a light that's quickly and easily digestible, I'll say.
No, I appreciate that. When I started that whole effort, one of the things I found very quickly, there are not many lawyers out on social media anywhere, much less in the dental space. And I think a big reason for that is because it's not the easiest thing in the world. I'm not going to lie, to bring a humorous or a lighthearted spin to some legal information. But also recognize the way people consume information. They want to be entertained at the same time. I found out very quickly, if you get on YouTube and you just do a 40-minute law school lecture, most people don't want to listen to that. So you do have to bring some of that humor to it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So let's just jump right in and talk about legal issues in an orthodontic practice. I know the majority of our audience is orthodontists out there. So what are some things that you think can cause really big problems in an ortho practice? It could be a dental too, but as you've been doing this and going through this, I'm sure there's probably some common things that you're seeing or things that docs need to be aware of. And you probably know I've got a younger audience on here. A lot of the docs that I work with are the startups, docs who are doing acquisitions and whatnot. And I think just a lot of times these are areas we don't talk a lot about. It doesn't get a lot of attention until it's attention you don't want.
No, definitely. I always say it's easier to prevent a mess on the front end than clean up one on the back end. And to your point, even just in the larger corporate world, legal departments are seen as they're a cost center for businesses because you don't make money out of legal compliance. I mean, you do if you prevent problems, but you don't generate revenue through addressing legal problems. And so that is a reason why it's not front of mind a lot of times. But no, the two big things I break down to two big categories that I see practices interested in, or they should be interested in. I think there's a category of things that they know are legal issues because they run into them all the time. So that's things, I think really the big ones there, any kind of patient interactions, standards of care, the patient contracts, the financial disputes, the divorced parent situations are always out there. And then social media. Everybody wants to get on social media, but most doctors, they don't know exactly what the legal requirements are, but they got this gut that it's kind of a potential minefield. They're a little more nervous about what they don't know, but they recognize they need to be on social media, but they recognize that there's some legal challenges there that they need to know about. And then there's some things I think that practices just don't really think about. HIPAA is incredibly complex, and a lot of people recognize they don't know as much about HIPAA as they should. And then informed consent is another big one. And and again, because I think people don't know everything they need to know about informed consent. And a lot of that comes from what I was talking about with the trial background. You don't really recognize why everything that should be a part of an informed consent process is in there until you see the way that plays out with the jury, recognize how important informed consent is for a legal defense in a malpractice case.
Yeah. So let's just dive into that and unpack that a little bit, because I feel like so many times we have so many steps that we focus on in an ortho office. Get the patient into the practice, get the patient into the consult room, get them to say yes, get them to start. And we hit all those highlights, and we know they need to sign an informed consent. And that's part of the paperwork that we either send out ahead of time or send out afterwards, or maybe have them sign in the office. Break that down and tell us about this little piece of information that isn't really a little piece of information that really maybe we should be paying attention to. If you're a newer doctor, maybe the things you need to be paid attention to. And maybe if you're a team member, that it's your job to present the informed consent. Maybe, I don't know what you're going to tell us, but I'm excited to have you unpack that just a little bit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I get into it, so there's some things that I always say. I feel like these are the dead horses that I beat about informed consent.
Let's hear it.
I know practices don't want to hear them because they slow the process down. So let me just give the disclaimer at the beginning. I totally understand the importance of an efficient intake process. I understand that every minute and every step that you add into that process is an opportunity to lose a patient and not convert that patient into an actual case start. So I am incredibly sympathetic to all of that. But I know that the informed consent process is one of the areas that practices try to shave time off that process. And the problem is, unlike some of the other things that are maybe not as important, again, informed consent, if you are sued by a patient for malpractice, your number one defense is if there's a risk that ends up happening to the patient, or they didn't get something that they thought they were going to get, and you told them that they might not get it, the informed consent is the way that you establish that as your legal defense. And if you haven't followed the proper procedure, then you lose that defense. And that's why it is so important. And as much as efficiency and all of that is such a priority, I really want practices to understand that this is not the area to shave time off.
Great.
A couple of specific things on that. First of all, I know it's really tempting. First of all, I always say informed consent is a process and not a form. I think a lot of practices get fixated on the form itself.
Yes.
And so then you think, let's just stick that in the packet with everything else that the patient fills out before they come in. And that's really tempting. But the law, your legal defense doesn't depend on a piece of paper. It depends on the process that you've walked a patient through, the risks and limitations of the treatment. So number one, please do not stick that in a packet of information that you give the patient to fill out before they even come in. And the reason for that is,
so agree.
You haven't seen the patient yet. You don't even know what treatment you're going to offer them. So if you don't know what treatment you're going to offer them, how can you explain to them the risks and limitations of treatment?
Yes.
So that's a big one. And then the other big one that I see all the time is not involving the doctor in the process at all. So, and I know a lot of practices, they'll have their treatment coordinator or somebody else like that handle the informed consent process. And I think that's fine. It can be fine. But I still think Informed consent at its legal core is that a doctor has relayed information to the patient. And there are a few states like Pennsylvania, for an example. Pennsylvania, technically, the informed consent is a non-delegable duty. It has to handle it.
Interesting.
And other states don't go quite that far, but they still expect for the doctor to be involved in that process. So even if you have your treatment coordinator or somebody else handle most of the informed consent process, at the very least, give the patient the opportunity to talk to the doctor. So maybe walk through the form with the patient and then say, do you have any questions? I'd be happy to have Dr. Smith come in. If you have some questions for the doctor, that kind of a thing, and at least interject an opportunity for the doctor to come in.
Yeah, that's great. It just gets my mind thinking a little bit. What if you've got a doc that says, I'd like to record this generically, me explaining the informed consent. And then after they've watched the video, we'll ask them if they want to ask any questions. Again, because I know a lot of my docs out there are like, how do I cut minutes? Can I send this to them to watch if they haven't made a decision in the office and they're coming in for their start appointment and we're sending them the contract ahead of time? Can I send them something? How does that fall, or can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's another possibility. Again, with the caveat that you said that you still have that opportunity for the patient to talk directly to the doctor.
Yeah.
I think that video could be used, but this is all going to come back down to if that patient sues you, the patients probably want to claim that their informed consent was not really informed. And if a patient says, yeah, they threw some information at me, but I had some questions I wanted to ask the doctor and never had a chance to ask those questions, then that's going to be fatal to the informed consent defense. And whether it's a video or your treatment coordinator that handles the front end, that opportunity to ask questions directly to the doctor is going to be what's important.
Yeah, that's great. So the take-home message is, even if you're delegating, number one, the doc should be with the treatment plan, making sure that they're letting the treatment coordinator know or the patient know, here are the concerns. And then that there's always a time for the patient to be meeting with the doctor, just to be able to have that opportunity. So you can check that off, that we went through the steps that are needed to help in the event that something hopefully never does happen. But if it were, at least you guys have gone through that. That's great. That's great. So how about, I'm going to take us on a different direction, moving a little bit away from informed consent, but these are all the things I get questions about, or I've been doing this a long time, but I think there's always gray area, and there's the urban legend of this is okay, but this isn't okay, or it depends on the Facebook group that you're in to what the answer is or whatnot. But how about, I get this all the time, marketing in-office contests, drawings. What can you do? What can't you do? It depends on the state. Can you solicit for patients? Can you not solicit for patients? All those different things. Is there anything that you think, here's a couple strong points I really think docs need to pay attention to or be on the lookout for when they're thinking about some of these different things that I just talked about?
Yeah, I definitely do. One thing you just said that I want to highlight so that people don't miss it is when you mentioned specific states having different, that's a real challenge. Like what you said with depending on what Facebook group you're in, somebody maybe, if I'm in Missouri and I'm talking online to a doctor that's in Arizona, the doctor in Arizona may tell me something that's 100% true for Arizona and is 0% true for Missouri.
Yes.
It is highly state specific with so many of these things that we're going to talk about. So that's why, painful as it is to spend a few dollars to talk to a lawyer in your state, sometimes you really need to do that. Make sure that you have your particular state's law nailed down. When we pivot to what you just asked about, then specifically the drawings and the contest, that is one that's highly dependent on state law. So any kind of a drawing where there's an element of chance, any kind of promotion that your practice does where you're pulling a name out of a hat, selecting somebody out of a pool of potential winners, that may possibly fall under your state sweepstakes law. And state sweepstakes law is one that is all over the board, depending on what state you're in.
I've had some docs get zinged with this, and you wouldn't even think that something like that would be that.
No, I hate that it's called sweepstakes law, because when you hear sweepstakes law, you think of Publishers Clearinghouse or the lottery. Neither of which does a drawing in office look like that, but it still potentially can't fall under sweepstakes law. So that's why I'll give you the three elements that generally is going to hold true for most states. when something may fall under sweepstakes law. So number one, there has to be an element of chance. So meaning anything where there's a drawing, where it's not, we're going to do this for every patient, but if you do something, you get entered, we're going to draw a name out. There has to be an element of chance. There has to be a prize of value. The dollar amount is going to depend by state, but hopefully you're not chintzy enough. If you're having a drawing for something, probably whatever you're giving away is of enough value that it's going to meet that definition in your state. And then the third one, the big one is, do patients have to do so? It's called consideration is the legal term, but it means, do they have to do something that has economic value to enter the drawing? So if you have a contest where patients, for every new case start, you get entered into a drawing. Clearly, there's economic value there because they're paying your practice for treatment. If you have to refer a friend or a family member to get entered into drawing, most states are going to say that referral is consideration because many courts have held that there's an economic value to a business referral.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. Now, if you have something like you have the kids color a picture and it gets posted up on the wall, and then everybody who draws a picture for us, we're going to draw a name out. That probably doesn't have economic value, but if there's any economic value at all to what the patients have to do to enter, then it probably does fall under your state sweepstakes law. That's bad news. The good news is most states, sweepstakes law is not really that difficult to comply with. This is a prime example of something. Talk to a lawyer one time, find out what the requirements are in your state. Most lawyers, we even at the AAO had to do this. The first time that we had a drawing after I came to the legal department, I talked to a lawyer who specialized in this. He gave us a template that fulfills all the law in the state of Missouri. It's very plug and play from that point where you just fill in blanks. Biggest thing is terms and conditions. The states are going to want you to have written terms and conditions. There may be some other requirements like with eligibility, you can't let a minor be eligible, or you can't, the length of the contest, or a no purchase required for entry type of requirement, some other things like that. But a lawyer absolutely can get you a template set up. So then you can do 100 of those contests in the future and you handle it on your own at that point. Just talk to a lawyer who knows your state's law and can get that set up for you the first time that you do it.
Yeah, that's great. Now, one of the things that I talk to my clients a lot about, and I'm curious because I don't think this falls under this stipulation, but a lot of times we'll have docs that will, when somebody's referred somebody in, they will write out a thank you card and maybe send whoever that referral is a Starbucks card or movie tickets or whatnot. I would think that would not fall under anything because even though a patient is choosing to refer a friend in, it isn't send a friend in, get a Starbucks card. It's if they aren't advertising it. But if it's just like that intrinsic kindness, thanking somebody, do where I'm going there?
Yeah, definitely. So that would not fall under state sweepstakes law because it's not a drawing. If it's just an after the fact, a gratuity by the doctor. And I think the key is something like that could fall under fee splitting rules, which I think we're going to talk about here in a minute.
I would love to. Yes.
But the hypothetical that you gave, if the doctor is not advertising it, so he's not out there inducing those referrals,
yes,
then it would not be fee splitting. But it's just a purely after the fact gratuity that was self-generated by the doctor, then that's not going to be fee splitting. But if it's advertised to the patients, if you refer somebody to us, then that could potentially fall under fee splitting.
Yeah. So let's just go right into that because that is something I really caution my docs in my offices about. You do this, we do this. You do this, we do this. And I, again, having done this for a while, worked in a lot of different states with a lot of different offices. I know for sure there is some very strict rules that we can get in trouble with, and even down to the point of potentially even the type of insurance you may be taking. So if you're a Medicaid practice, I know that even with Medicaid and whatnot, they have some different rules even around how you get state funded patients into your practice and whatnot. I don't want to put you too much into a rabbit hole there, but let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the Medicaid and some of those are incredibly complicated questions because that gets into some federal laws like the Stalk law and anti-kickback law. No, that's one I'm going to punt totally on that one too. If you have questions about those, you need to talk to a lawyer in person because those are really complicated areas of law and highly penalized areas of law if you violate them.
Yes.
So I'm not even going to get into those because those are far beyond the scope of podcasts. The more informal, just patient referral incentives are a little easier to address. So generally, the states, again, can differ from state to state. Generally, they're basically the same. And so basically under most states, so most states have, every state in the country has a fee splitting. Dental board has a rule against fee splitting. So if that's something like a GP refers me a patient, I'm going to give them a certain percentage of the treatment fee. Everybody knows that's fee splitting. You can't do that, obviously. The referral incentives are a little more of a challenge. So there's two elements for something to fall under fee splitting. Number one, it has to be on a per patient basis, because I get questions a lot of times. Practices get nervous and they say, we got these GPs that refer us to orthodontic cases. And so every year at Christmas time, we send them a case of wine, or we send the doctor tickets to a sporting event or something like that. Is that fee splitting? And the answer is likely not, because it's not per patient. It's just one gift per year, that kind of thing. And even so, if it's not per patient, you can even get into some expensive, maybe you've got a GP that refers you a lot of cases, and so you send them on a trip to the Caribbean or something. That's fine as long as it's not per patient. If it is per patient, it could potentially be fee splitting, and that applies not just for providers, but also patients or friends and family. I think some people think fee splitting is limited just to doctors or providers. You can fee split with a patient too. If you advertise to your patients, every new case that you send us will give you whatever, an iPad or an Amazon gift card or whatever. If it's per patient, every one of those you send to us, we're going to give you this prize, and it could be fee splitting. And then the other elements, so they're per patient basis, and then it has to be of more than nominal value. So most dental boards will allow you to give per patient if it's nominal value. That's one that you need to know your state's law, because it's going to be all over the place on what they define as nominal value. But I'll say in general, it's pretty low. We're talking like $30 or $40. This is not $500 or $1,000. So if you're given a $50 Amazon gift card for every new referral that you get from a patient, that may be above nominal value in your state. You need to check that out. And then the other thing you need to look at is some states will measure that on an aggregate basis and not per gift. So even if you're given $20 gift cards, if you give somebody 5 of them, they're really cranking in the leads for you. That might still be over nominal value, depending on how your state measures it, if they measure it per incident or on an aggregate basis.
Oh, interesting. That's good information. I'm sure everyone who's listening is taking down notes on this. Okay, reevaluate. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to switch gears again on you, reviews, and what can we do? I know you've had some stuff out there socially on this. What can we say? What can we not say if we're responding to a review? Let's talk a little bit about that. And I guess I'm switching gears from, because I think we've covered it, paying somebody to give you a review, though you may want to talk about that still a little bit more, to maybe just the legal side of what can you say? And then I'm going to just tweak a little bit more. What can you say? But then also, what can we post in regard to patients and whatnot out there? I know I'm giving you a broad, we'll start with just reviews. Let's start there.
Yeah. So reviews are really challenging, because either you've got a positive review from a patient, and if you didn't ask them for that, you didn't know it was coming, you want to respond to it. It's just a normal human thing to want to say, hey, thanks, really appreciate that. Or if it's a negative review, then that's really the really challenging one, because you want to address that. Your doctor that, spent a lot of time and effort and money on your education, and you really pride yourself in your reputation, and you don't want to just leave something nasty hanging out there. So you want to respond to that and defend yourself. But the biggest challenge with the reviews is, especially post HIPAA, it is so easy you're thinking in terms of responding to what the patient said. You're not thinking in terms of, am I disclosing their personal health information or not? And it's so easy to slip into that territory. And then also, bonus fun fact, not only is there HIPAA to worry about, there are financial privacy laws in nearly every state that work the same way as HIPAA. So not only do you have to be careful about disclosing protected health information, but you also, if a patient says something about a payment dispute, you can commit the same kind of violation with financial information.
Oh, good to know. Yeah.
If the patient says something about, well, doctor, I've paid for a year and haven't seen the results I was promised, and you want to tell the patient, no, actually, you haven't paid me a dime. That may be true, but that's also the patient's protected financial information. And so it works just the same way as HIPAA. But So on the negative reviews, if you call the AO up and you say, hey, we got this nasty review and we want to respond to it, here's what we want to respond with. It doesn't matter what you say afterwards. I'm going to give you 2 sentences that I want you to stick to, and only those 2 sentences to respond to that. And those 2 sentences are, it appears there's been a misunderstanding. Please contact our office to set up a time to discuss.
Oh, that's great. I want you to say that just one more time. I want everyone to hear it one more time. This is how you respond. Negative review.
It appears there has been a misunderstanding. Please contact our office to set up a time to discuss. So you're not, one thing you don't want to do, you just don't want to just let the nasty comment sit there and not respond. You are responding to it. Another thing you're not doing is you're not committing an admission of liability. So in the courtroom, admissions of liability are a huge deal. If I have a car wreck and I run into you and I get out at the scene of the accident and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was on my phone, wasn't paying attention. I went through that red light and I ran into you. I'm so sorry. That's an admission of liability that basically it absolves the plaintiff of any duty to prove liability because you've admitted liability. They can go straight to damages. So plaintiff's attorneys get really good at twisting things that people say, trying to say they're an admission of liability. So that's the kind of thing, if you're responding online, and I'm sorry is a big one. If you say, we're sorry this has happened, we're sorry that you experienced this, those are all things that a plaintiff's attorneys can try to twist into an admission of liability. So it appears there has been a misunderstanding. It's not an admission of liability. And then please contact our office, set up a time to discuss, and what you've not done, you've not said anything about the patient's protected health information. You've not even really acknowledged that they are a patient, which is another big thing.
Oh, so good. Oh, this
avoiding
is just great.
The HIPAA violations. So that's on the negative side. Now I'll go to the positive side. When you got the patient that says, Dr. Smith was amazing, he says all these glowing things about you, normal human response is to get back online and say, thank you so much. We loved having you as a patient. You were a great patient, something like that. If you even acknowledge that the person was a patient in your practice, you've still disclosed personal health information about them. That could still potentially be a HIPAA violation. So my stock answer on the good side is the flip of what I just said for the bad ones. The good stock answer is something like, we love to hear reviews about that. Thank you so much for the positive review. So you've not acknowledged that they're a patient, but you've acknowledged, yeah, this is a great review. Thanks very much for the review. But you've not said something that actually acknowledged, yeah, they are a patient.
Wonderful. Oh, that right there was a huge nugget, because I think we're all living in this world now where we live off of our Google and our Yelp reviews and our Facebook and our Instagram and everything everywhere. And I myself included, I wouldn't know that you might not be able to say something, especially on the nice side of it. When it's a positive review, you want to just gush right back because, all your endorphins are out there and you're like, oh, they love us.
And you love that patient. You've probably seen them for a year and a half or 2 years and they become family to you. Yeah, you absolutely. No, in this whole area, these online reviews, it's the angel and the devil on the shoulders. The angel is all of the business considerations, either that we love our patients with the good reviews or we want to defend ourselves. And the devil is HIPAA, that's saying if you say anything that gives up any personal health information about that patient, including just the fact that they were a patient at your practice, then you can get into trouble. So it's trying to balance those two voices.
Wow, that's great. Thank you for sharing that, because I know that a lot of people their minds were blown like mine. Okay, this is good. And a lot of times it's not the doctors that are responding either. It's their team members. It's whoever has been assigned that job potentially. So I'm sure this will come up in a team meeting somewhere along the way. So as we start to finish up here, let's talk a little bit about if a practice wants to lower their risk and avoid legal problems. What do you think best advice for keeping things on the up and up, let's just say within an office? If you had, again, those key things that you would say, docs, you may be new at this, or you may have been doing this for a while. You may have a whole staff turnover going through COVID and our great hire and rehire. What are some things that they should be really paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the challenge there is every practice in the world, they don't want to be breaking the law. But it's this ocean that you just don't even know where to start. Picking up grains of sand off the beach where you just don't even know where to start and you don't know what you don't know. and all of those kind of things. So that's why I really push for something I call legal issue inventory, which is just bare bones. The starting point is take 3 to 4 months. What are the problems that we run into in our practice? What are the problem situations with patients, or what are the questions that we hear about online? Anything that potentially any legal aspect to it at all. Let's just make a list of those. Do that for 3 or 4 months. I think if you do that for 3 or 4 or maybe 6 months tops, you get a pretty good baseline for here are our most pressing legal issues that we need to make sure that we're in compliance with what the law is. So you compile that list for a few months, you get together as a team, you rank them in order of priority. Okay, out of these 16, we think this is the one we encounter most often. Let's hit that one first and then work through them and then make that a checklist that we're going to find out what the answers are to these. Maybe we can do that through online research. Maybe we need to talk to a lawyer here in our town, whatever we need to do to get an answer, and then make sure we've instituted the best practices to make sure that we're in compliance then. And do that. That'll give you a really solid baseline for these are the problems we run into most often, and how do we make sure you can't eliminate 100% of your legal risk ever. But if you can eliminate the 80% most common things, that's going to be a huge step toward eliminating your legal risks. So do that to start with, and then just stick a whiteboard up somewhere that you can keep track of issues as they come up, and then do the same thing in another 6 months.
Yeah, that's great.
Write those things down as you come across them, and then, okay, here's our new list of things that we haven't addressed. Let's go through and find the answers to those and implement them. And then if a practice can do that every 6 months, I think you'd eliminate 80% or more of your legal risk that you run into. But I know saying that, it's a time commitment. So that's why I make the joke. It's like the dentists and orthodontists telling us to brush and floss a gazillion times a day, and we don't see the value in it. So I'm not going to do it. You just got to trust me. There's significant value, the same value that brushing and flossing has for the patient, there is in doing that legal issue inventory on a regular basis to monitor what your problems are.
I think that's such a good little nugget of information. And I almost like where my consultant brain goes is it's almost like having an SOP, standard operating procedure manual for legal issues. So if somebody gives us a review, good or bad, how do we handle it? If we're running a contest, does it meet our standards for making sure that we aren't going against whatever rules? Then I think if you can just work on that, like you said, pick a few at a time and work through that, and then go back and reevaluate. Has any laws changed? Has anything changed within our industry? I think that will just help our practices so much. And I feel bad because I've never really thought or told my clients to do something like that, but it makes perfect sense. I just don't think that a lot of times, like you said, legal is at the forefront of our minds. It's really more of that, let's hope we never have to get there.
It is super simple for those things to slip out of mind until they become a problem. And so that's why when we at the AL legal department, we get calls from members, 95% of the time it's can you call me back in the next 15 minutes because the patient's coming in, or mom and dad are coming in an hour and I have to know the answer to this.
Yeah.
So the more you can take care of do all that groundwork ahead of time instead of having to try to figure it out in the heat of the moment, then you make better decisions when mom and dad aren't coming in an hour to talk about the problem.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So as we finish up, and this has just been a wonderful episode, and wow, just a lot of really good nuggets of information that you've been able to give us. Anything that we haven't covered that you think, Jill, I really wanted to make sure I get this point out, and anything as a little takeaway for the audience?
I mentioned it already, but I just really want to drive home that point that my old saying that it's better to avoid a mess on the front end and try to clean it up on the back end. Maybe translate that. It's cheaper to avoid a mess on the front end, clean it up on the back end. So if I've learned anything from 20 plus years of being in law practice, and before I was dealing with orthodontists and practices, I was dealing with corporations, everybody across the board sees that legal stuff as a big pain, a cost center, and until it's a problem. Yeah. So please, again, I go back to the same way that you preach the preventative dental care to your patients, recognize that all of this legal stuff is preventative dental care. It's just legal.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Trey, as we finish up, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, wants to get a hold of through the AAO, maybe didn't even for some reason realize that they could reach out. Can you give us how somebody could get a hold of you, or if they've got questions, like what's the best way to?
Yeah, absolutely. So for orthodontists who are AO members now, I hate it because we are a little limited in what we can do for them. We can't technically represent them. We can't give legal advice just because of limitations on licensing and some things like that. But said that, we provide them lots of information, general information, and case-specific information. So we do get calls all the time from members who, hey, mom and dad are coming in an hour. What can you tell me about the contract, or those kind of things? So the best way to do that, if you get on the AAO's website, get the main number, just ask to be transferred to the legal department. Either Kathy, our department administrator, or one of the attorneys would be more than happy to talk with you.
Right.
The AAO member website has got a lot of the legal resources too, and templates, for contracts, informed consent, a lot of resources like that. So there may, if you have a question, the answer may already be there. So that's worth checking out as well. And then the final thing, we already mentioned it, my social media stuff, the Orth Attorney. Instagram is my home base. The kind of issues that we're talking about here today is exactly what I talk about there. So make sure you check that out and follow me on Instagram, the Orth Attorney. And if you've heard things that pique your interest today, that's all I talk about there. So make sure you check that out.
Yeah. And I just want to say, great resource, guys, out there. Definitely go get on, follow Trey. You'll get nice little updates in a humorful way. I was joking with him before the show started. I love his wit, and what he puts out is good information, but it's light and easy to consume. So thank you again for being on the show. This was such good information.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Yep. So as you may know, I really love to finish up my Hey Docs with a little speed round. So are you ready for a speed round with me?
Absolutely. Bring it on.
Okay. Describe your style in one word.
I want to go with dork, but I know that's a little self-derogatory, so maybe relatable is a better word. And that really is a philosophy, even with the Orth Attorney stuff. So much of what I deal with as a lawyer can be so inaccessible to people, and just lawyers themselves. Lawyers don't have a great reputation as far as personalities. So the more I can make that just accessible to people and relatable, that's really what I strive for.
I love that. I love that. So what are you listening to or watching right now?
So my running joke with all of my friends and families, if you ask me a question that starts with a, hey, have you seen, and then whatever, Stranger Things or whatever the big thing is, almost guaranteed the answer is going to be no. I'm just not a TV and movie person, but I'll tell you what I am addicted to is YouTube. I think little 10-minute nuggets of something. So my two big things, cooking. I love watching YouTube on regional cuisine and making authentic Italian and authentic Chinese and those kind of things. So cooking, and then fishing, which is completely unrelated to that, but I'm a big YouTube fishing fan. So I am a YouTube junkie.
I love that. My husband is very similar. He consumes YouTube, and it's usually somebody building a house or it is, and he'll just watch it when he can. That's his unwind. So I can relate. And I think that's great. How about anything you do just for you?
So I just mentioned fishing. That's probably what I go back to. For me, I know a lot of people have a picture of fishing from some old family reunion or something. For me, fishing is a Zen Buddhist experience where I can get out in the boat on the water and get 100% mentally locked into something for 8 hours. I know it annoys the other people in my life, but that's my deal. And it's so mentally refreshing for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How about a hidden talent you'd want to share with?
I'll just say this. It's probably been since I was in music class in 8th or 9th grade that I've sung in front of anybody. But in the car, I am Michael Bublé and Alan Jackson and every other great male vocalist that you can think of,
awesome.
All rolled into one. But I will never share that with anybody.
It's just for you.
No,
it's
absolutely.
Just for your personal listening.
Absolutely. But you just got to take my word. In the car, I am the best male singer you've ever heard.
That's awesome. And then as we finish up, do you have any big, hairy, audacious goals that you'd want to share with us?
The most noteworthy one, honestly, is I got into this whole social media thing and start looking at how do you translate legal information into something that's enjoyably consumable on social media. It's a big challenge. But I feel like it's one that's worth undertaking. And then as I started doing that, originally my focus was on orthodontists specifically. And then I realized, hey, it's actually the whole dental community out there that needs this. It's not just orthodontists. There, as I looked into this, there was a void completely across the dental community as a whole with legal resources for dentists or specialists of any kind. And I have plenty to do in my day job to keep me busy with the O stuff, but I feel really passionate about getting this resource. And I certainly want to help our orthodontists out and love them to death. But I'm really even looking at the broader dental community. I want to get this information to them and try to help them out.
I love it. What a great goal and very needed. So good luck with that. You have one follower out there. I know you've got many more, but I'm definitely one. And trying to push that out there to my clients as well. So thanks again, Trey, for being on. And I hope you will be on it another time for us.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
All right. Thank you.
All right.